the failure mode is slow and quiet, and that's why it keeps happening. Nobody regrets a build decision in the first quarter. That's the whole problem with it. The build decision got cheap, but the ownership decision cost what it always did. Hello, and welcome back to the It Depends Lessons in Technology Leadership podcast. I, as always, am your host. My name is Kevin Goldsmith. I am a Chief Technology Officer. I have been working in the software industry for almost 35 years now. And in this podcast, I try to share things I've learned over the years, the mistakes I've made so that you don't make my mistakes. You can make all brand new mistakes. And we talk about how to be an effective leader and manager in technology. I've been away for a few weeks. I'm excited to be back from my break, and I'm excited to get into some new topics. As always, I'm really interested to hear what you would like to hear more about. You can email me at contact@itdependsbook.net. In the show notes, there's a link to a survey that includes what topics you would like to hear about. I absolutely get topics from folks who filled out the survey or who've emailed me. Let me know what you'd like to hear more about, maybe even what you'd like to hear less about. As always, the topics, if they're not coming directly from you, they're coming from recent conversations I've had, things I've been thinking about either in my own job or in some of the mentoring I do for emerging technology leaders or peers at other companies. Recently, I was having a conversation with an engineer at my company about the build versus buy decision. They were proposing that we write something to replace a vendor that we have and that they could do just as easy of a job and maybe save us some money. And that led me to a mantra I've had for years and years and years, which is let's not invent things that already exist. For most of that time, that was very much aimed at developers. If you work with developers, if you manage developers, you've come across the argument that this vendor we have or this open source library isn't a great match for what we do, and I could replace it, or I could build my own version and be way better than this one. And maybe I'll just do that, and then we can stop using that thing. So that's where I've had this mantra for don't invent things that already exist. Now, understanding that the name of this podcast is It Depends, having an absolutist mantra like that seems very much at odds. Maybe we should sometimes think about inventing things that already exist. To be honest, it was very absolutist because that made it very clear to the developers on my teams, hey, let's not waste time on stuff like this. If you come to me, that's the challenge I'm going to give you. It doesn't mean we never did it. It just meant that the hurdle to make that decision was pretty high. And it's really a pragmatism argument. It's really all about where should we be spending our engineering time and resources? Should it be in differentiating things? And when I say differentiating things, I mean things that set our company apart from other companies. So for example, reinventing a caching layer. Plenty of these things exist. Should we write our own caching layer? Probably not, unless we are operating at such a massive scale that all the existing solutions are not serving us. And we have to invent our own. And that will provide a better user experience. That will be a reason for people to choose our product. That will be a reason for people not to choose a competing product. That's a good reason to do something because we can make our company stand out for our customers. Doing it because, oh, it's really interesting and I thought about a cool way to do it. Or this mostly works for us, except it kind of doesn't in some cases. So we should do our own thing. But would customers ever notice the difference between these two things? If the answer is no, then that's a good reason not to do something. Giving your team absolutes sometimes, where they know they have a pretty high bar to overcome things, is way better than making it more wishy-washy, because then they'll find good reasons to excuse this thing that they want to do that's not really a benefit to the company. It's really something they're scratching their own itches on. Engineering time is the scarcest thing we have still. And it's generally, engineers are some of the highest paid people in your software company. Spend their time, spend their energy on the things that help differentiate your company from your competitors. Don't spend that time, those resources, that money, let's be clear, on things that don't set you apart. There's little value to that. And that's the way I always thought about it. Now, what's changed is that AI has come into the picture, and AI-assisted software development. And that's changing the economics a lot. Now, it's not a senior engineer who wants to write their own logging library. It's now a spreadsheet with an annual CRM license, say, on one line, and then comparing the cost of that vendor, which can sometimes be quite high, to the cost of maybe a developer or two, plus some tokens, to build your own custom CRM solution. And it seems like that number is smaller. It's way cheaper. This is that SaaS apocalypse thing you hear about a lot. But it's a real decision we all get to make or have to make now. Things like project management software, internal admin tools, reporting layers, those things were only ever practical to build in-house at really big companies. When I worked at Microsoft, when I worked at Adobe, even at Spotify, a lot of times we had our own versions of those things that were built in-house, because at our scale, the existing off-the-shelf solutions didn't work, or they didn't work very well, or they didn't match the way we worked. And so it was actually more practical to have a whole team dedicated to building this undifferentiated thing, because at our level of scale, it was really important. And we would be wasting a lot of time and energy otherwise. The nominal cost of building and maintaining something like this was cheaper. But at a smaller company, it wouldn't make sense at all. Because at a 300-person company, do you really want to have a dedicated team of software development and test and design and product management building a CRM solution? Or do you just want to buy one? You just want to buy one. There's no benefit to it. Now, that's changing. And that's changing across the industry. It's gotten a lot cheaper to build those things. So it's been time for me to rethink that. I'm not abandoning that mantra. I'm just revising. And for me, at least, the revision around it is way smaller than the enthusiasm in the industry around it suggests. This matters at two levels at once. There's the EM version, where you got a developer on your team saying, hey, I want to build a new caching library because the one we're using isn't quite as cool as the one I have in my head, and I think I could do it over a weekend, and we should just switch to this new thing. Literally had that argument in the past. And there is the one with my CTO or VP or director hat, which is that same decision, but at a different scale. Should we build our own CRM? Because, wow, we spend a lot of money on our existing CRM, and it doesn't seem like it is exactly what we need. We could do something that's very specific to our purpose by ourselves instead. So there's two versions of the same argument now. The question is whether it's cheaper to build or to buy. The question is now easy and mostly answers itself in favor of building. But the real question now is, what are you willing to own? Building has always had two costs: the cost of making it and the cost of having made it. And this, by the way, is the part that oftentimes within a company, a developer isn't thinking about. They think about, oh, it's a fun weekend project. I'm going to build my own logging library or caching library or whatever. And then it's cool. Then we have this thing and it's better than this other thing we're using, this thing we're buying, or this thing we're using from open source. But they don't think about, okay, well, what about next year, and the year after, and the year after that, right? They don't think about the maintenance costs. They don't think about the support costs. So that's the two costs: the cost of having made it and the cost of making it. AI has made the cost of making it way cheaper, especially if you're a developer and you're not thinking about the cost of the token. The second one is basically where it always has been. Again, you have AI tools, so it's easier to update and that kind of thing, but it's somebody's still got to be paying attention to it. It's not like I built this thing, now we just use it and I never look at it again. Now we built this thing and I need to stop what I'm doing every once in a while and make sure if I'm using open source components, like, do I need to update those? Are there CVEs against them? Those kinds of things. Like, I now need to spend maybe not a lot of engineering time, but I definitely need to spend brain time periodically reviewing, is this thing still working for us? Do we need to update it? All that kind of stuff never goes away. You have the benefit when you use an external component, a vendor, they are continually updating it. An open source project, people involved in the project are updating it. An internal project doesn't get updated unless somebody stops what they're doing to go and update it. This is an opportunity cost as well. The build decision got cheap, but the ownership decision cost what it always did. There's some competing forces here. Finance is looking hard at software right now, especially for all of us who are using AI, because the AI costs are coming in. So every license renewal is a conversation. That pressure is real and it's not unreasonable. Engineers can genuinely build in a week what used to take a quarter, and they know it. Every third-party tool we adopt is a dependency, and supply chain risk is a more serious argument than it was 5 years ago. Our ticketing system, we had to change the way we work to adopt a ticketing system. What if we had one that works the way we work? And now it's easy to make those things where it never had been easy before. So now it's a very tempting thing to do. If you do this wrong, you do not find out you were wrong when you build it. It looks great when you build it. 18 months later, whoever that person whose fun weekend project was building a custom CRM solution for the company, they've moved on and now there's a problem. You have a new sales leader and they don't like that tool. They want it to work in a different way. The person who cared the most about it is gone. Now some other person has to go get themselves familiar with the system, make the changes. It's a big cost. The failure mode is slow and quiet, and that's why it keeps happening. Nobody regrets a build decision in the first quarter. That's the whole problem with it. As always, I want to give you a framework to help you make this decision for yourself. So 4 questions to answer before agreeing to build something that already exists. The blast radius, the risk. If this fails, gets compromised, or goes unmaintained, what stops working? An internal dashboard going dark is an annoyance. Auth going dark or being compromised could be a company-ending event. The ownership cost. Who monitors it, who patches it, who secures it, and who answers for it at 2 a.m. for the next several years. Name the person, not just the team. Does building this change something the business actually cares about? Does it differentiate the business? Or does it just fit your preferences better than the alternative? Fit is a real argument now, but only when the fit gain is meaningful. Having an exit path. If a good third-party option shows up in a year, can you drop yours without pain? Building as a bridge is a legitimate strategy. Building as a permanent commitment is a different decision. What this 4-question test helps you see is it moves the conversation off cost, which is where the argument is currently being won, sometimes for the wrong reasons. It separates the 2 build cases that look identical on a slide, the small, contained, exit-friendly thing and the load-bearing permanent one. Ask who patches it in year 3. If nobody can answer, you haven't made the decision yet. A while ago, pre-AI, I was at an early stage B2B startup. Early stage meaning we didn't have a lot of money. And we were building a complicated system, advanced, and we had a lot of places we needed to spend money, and I was looking for every possible way to save money. The lead developer was really confident there was a well-known open source component for auth. And if we wanted to look at that instead of looking at a vendored auth solution, they weren't arguing to build one from scratch, but they were going to have to extend it because we had unique things. And so there was development on top of it, but it was building on top of something. I said, okay, because the auth was expensive, very expensive. Okay, well, this will save us some money. Great. The developer, pretty sure, okay, I need about a week to add the custom things we need on top of it, and then it'll be perfect, and then we can use it moving forward. So we tried it and it worked. That first quarter, initial customers seemed to work pretty well. But of course, it's an NOS system. So we had to keep updating it. The underlying open source library was getting continually updated as attacks were coming in. Our customers were adding new requirements, which required more time. If we'd used a vendor solution, these were all kinds of things that were included out of the box. We ended up spending a lot of time on it. So the money we saved on it from not buying something ended up being a wash with the development time we spent on it, the opportunity cost, the features we didn't build because we were having to go back and do a new update on the OS system, the time I had to spend because this is a B2B product. So working through security with their potential customers, trying to assure them that we were secure, even though we had our own in-house solution instead of a well-known, well-respected solution. But we didn't really save that much money on it. After I left the company, in a very correct, no argument from me decision, they moved to the vendor DOS solution. The amazing thing was almost maybe a month after they'd switched to that vendor DOS solution, that open source component had a significant vulnerability. A bunch of sites were compromised. So the timing of that was just really lucky for them. If they were still on that solution, they would have possibly been one of those compromised sites. It would have raised serious concerns from the customers that the company had and would have made it really hard for the company to get more customers. It was a close shave. But this is, again, a case where I thought building in-house was going to be a better choice for the company. Really, we should have just bought and figured out another way to save money because this was something that was a critical core component that we had to get right. Having good auth is maybe not a differentiating thing, but having bad auth is differentiating in a bad way. Or having unsecure auth is differentiating in a not good way. A more recent thing, and this is where this kind of speaks to AI directly, as we were embracing more and more AI tooling within my current company, we jumped in pretty early. We were starting to use MCP servers across the company to help automate lots of different processes. For a lot of our vendors that we worked with, they didn't have MCP servers initially. And so rather than not be able to use those tools, we built our own internal MCP servers to talk to our tools using the vendor APIs. But the moment an official one would ship from that vendor, we'd switch to that, specifically so that we wouldn't have to maintain and secure and update the internal ones. Our vendors are much more motivated to keep their MCP servers up to date, working, adding new features, keeping up, than we would be having built these things just to bridge a gap. So that was a build decision made, but with an exit already in mind. The pattern across this one and that earlier auth decision, the same instinct in both cases, but opposite outcome. The difference was not the quality of the engineering, it was a blast radius and whether there was a way out. One of those we built because we had to, the other we built because it was cheaper. Only one of those things is a good reason. Where building now makes sense in a way it didn't make before AI. Small services, custom components, where every available option forces you to change how you work. Glue between systems that no vendor is going to build for you. Maybe in the past, you might have hired a consultancy to build that glue. Now maybe you can do it yourself. Internal tooling with a contained blast radius where that fit to your company genuinely affects throughput, genuinely changes how the company operates in a way that customers will notice. And building those bridges where nothing exists yet and you expect the market eventually to catch up. So really you're just addressing a short-term gap and not a long-term lock into an internal solution. Where it still doesn't make sense, regardless of how cheap building has become, again, think about the blast radius, authentication and identity. Replacing third-party auth with homegrown is opening yourself up to being compromised, and the savings will not cover the incident. Payments, anything holding customer data or PII, anything on the critical path. These can be company-ending events. If your payment system is compromised and your customers are exposed, if their PII leaks, those kinds of things, depending on your industry, these are company-ending events. Is this something you want to take a risk on with a project built in-house when there's entire companies whose whole existence is to keep that one function working and secure? You are not going to out-invest those vendors with a few developers and some tokens. So that's the easy choice, right? Maybe you want to pay for that instead of doing it yourself, especially if it isn't your business. If it is your business, that's differentiating. Okay. But you're going to invest a lot more than a couple developers and some tokens in that case. There is a license cost trap. The comparison being made is a license line item against a build effort now. And that comparison isn't always honest because it's a sort of a one-time cost to developers, 3 weeks, a few $100s in tokens versus like a $10,000 a year license is what you start doing the math in your head. Maybe even what your CFO starts doing the math and oh, well, this is way cheaper, but you don't think through years of ownership and on call and patching and compliance evidence if you have to do those kinds of things. What does it do to your SOC 2 accreditation? Things like that. The rebuild, when the person who wrote it leaves because this was a pet project for them, or they just get bored with it and they don't want to support it anymore. Run that number, include all those costs before you make the decision, not after. Supply chain risk is an interesting thing because I do think that changes the equation a little bit for me on build versus buy. Every third-party tool, every third-party library is an attack surface. So for small things now, I might actually lean more towards building to reduce our exposure on third-party libraries rather than just use a third-party library to increase it. Again, risk is a huge factor here. So how small is this? How much of this do we depend on? Is this differentiating? Where now I might lean more on, hey, we just want to use this functionality from this library. Maybe we do it ourselves. Where before I would have said, no, just use the library. Don't waste time on that. Now I might actually make a different argument just to reduce dependencies on third parties and reduce our attack surface. That's one place where I am genuinely kind of thinking a little bit different than I used to. Where this logic tends to fail, that weekend prototype that somebody just did, that quietly becomes a production thing because they just inserted it in without anybody making a decision, that's always been a problem. The marginal improvement that is genuinely an improvement, not a neutral thing. It's hey, this is better, but it's still not worth that permanent maintenance obligation. It's slightly better. It's not meaningfully better in a way that's going to change the direction of the business. Something to do this week, some homework. List the internal tools your team owns. For each one, name the person who would patch it if a vulnerability dropped tomorrow, and how you would know if a vulnerability dropped tomorrow. The projects with no names on them are the ones you should be actively looking to replace or to get someone to make a commitment to own it. And if you can't get anybody to commit to own it, that's a good argument to replace it. This same decision shows up now also in headcount. And most people haven't really connected that build versus buy where it shows up in headcount. Thinking kind of historically, let's say you had a capability gap. You're adopting a new technology and nobody on your team currently knows it. Or your company is moving into a new business area and you don't have that knowledge on your team. This might be where you might hire a contractor to either help your team learn it or to own it, or you might open a full-time role or a team. You might build a team around it. Now, where that new capability, where that new area is not differentiating and not business critical, you used to probably cover that with contractors. You don't need that. It's not differentiating. Do you really need to build full-time capability in-house? Arguably not. Where you might have made that decision before, a lot of it maybe can be covered with agents instead. Especially if it's non-differentiating, that means a lot of people know it. That means this is table stakes. Now, that's the kind of stuff agents are pretty good at. You can get by with a fewer number of people who are more broadly T-shaped, but not in this specific area, being assisted with AI. Where it is business critical, where it is differentiating, that shape changes rather than disappearing. Where you might have hired a team, you hire 1 or 2 strong people and augment them instead. Now, this is a buy decision, even though nothing is getting purchased in the traditional sense. You are not making a year-long contract for SaaS. Spending on tokens rather than a contract is still choosing not to own something permanently. The build test applies here too. Blast radius and ownership do not stop mattering because the thing you're buying is capability rather than software. You used to fill a gap with a person, now you fill some of them with spend, and the decision about which is a real leadership judgment. Now, thinking about people in your company, for the engineer that wants to build this thing, to either let you out of having to use a vendor or to replace a vendor, there are 2 distinct motivations that kind of look the same from the outside. This is an interesting problem for that person, or they disagree with how the existing solution was built. And they can make all these points around why it is not technically the right solution for your problems. Both of these are legitimate. Neither is a justification. The management move is not to shut it down, not to shut this engineer down. It is to redirect their energy to the work that genuinely is differentiating for the company, which is usually harder and less fun immediately, but is more important to your business. For the finance team, if you're interacting with the finance team and they're looking for ways to save money, software spend is under real scrutiny right now. And a CTO who cannot explain the license line will lose that argument. Why do we need to pay for this? Why can't we just build it? Because we're spending all this other money on AI. Going in with a 3-year ownership number changes that conversation from cost avoidance to risk transfer. So bringing that entire picture in, moving it from a line item in this year's spend to a multi-year line item and also a risk argument will help you show them why and your motivations and why this is actually the right thing for the company. For an executive in the company, somebody built something impressive in 2 days, let's say. It's not even from the technology team. It's a salesperson playing with vibe coding or a product manager or something like this. So somebody built something in a couple days, and now the question is why we can't just use that thing instead of this other thing that we're paying all this money for. The honest answer involves talking about the parts that weren't in the demo. For example, the maintenance, the security, the operating, all those things that are part of using software, but aren't obvious when you're just looking at, hey, I built this thing in a weekend. It's as good as or better than this thing we're paying $100,000 for every year. We should just do this ourselves. Cool, except now you're going to have a dedicated developer or 2, where honestly, maybe you used to have 6 or 7. You're still going to have a dedicated developer or 2. Guess what? They are more expensive than that vendor. And that vendor's got 100 people working on this thing. You got 2 people. Who do you think is going to be doing a better job moving forward? If somebody that works for you comes to you and they're explaining to you why they want to solve a problem that is already solved, what they're telling you is that they want harder work. Give them harder work instead. Rather than having them solved problems, have them solve unsolved problems and just find ones that are more aligned to your business needs. For years and years, I would tell people on my team, why are we building this? This is not something that differentiates our company versus other companies. This is a solved problem. Why are we solving a solved problem? Or why are we inventing something that already exists? I was very close to absolute, very much on the buy side from my own experience. Spending engineering resources on solved problems was just not pragmatic. And if you get one thing from everything I talk about week after week and everything I wrote about in my book, pragmatism wins here. That position was correct for most of the last few decades, and it was easy to hold because building a fitted alternative was almost never worth it. What's changed now is that the cost of building something specifically fitted to your company has dropped far enough that fit is a real argument for the first time. This is a genuine change and it deserves to be taken seriously. But what hasn't changed at all is risk, security, the total cost of ownership. The reasons not to build something like auth in-house, are exactly the same reasons they were, and none of them were ever about how long it took to write. Where we're overcorrecting is that the temptation is to treat this as a bigger shift than it is, because the vibe-coded demos are convincing and the license invoices are annoying. So the move is at the edges. Small things, contained things, things with an exit. The line moved and moved a lot less than the tooling makes it feel like it moved. If there's a principle here, it is build the things your business needs to be different about. Build the things that bring you differentiation against your competitor. The things that are table stakes, buy those things. Buy the things your business needs to merely work. Cheap to build was never the argument, and it still isn't. Because cheap only thinks about the cost to create it. It doesn't think about the cost to maintain it, the cost to support it, that total cost of ownership. For you, look at what your team owns today and ask which of these things you would choose to own again, knowing what you now know it costs. And then ask the same question about the next thing somebody proposes building. Not inventing things that already exist was never about the cost of inventing them. It was about what you take on when you do. Thanks again for listening. It's great to be back. It was also great to take a break. We should all take breaks regularly. I will see you next week in the newsletter. I will see you back here in 2 weeks on the podcast. Have a great week. Thanks for listening to the It Depends podcast. If you liked it, please share it, please rate it, and please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. All music in this episode comes from Answers to April. For more information on Answers to April, visit answerstoapril.com. This is a production of Unit Circle Media.